Hi, I'm Kitty. When I was 16, my parents looked me dead in the eye and said I was useless. They packed my things, locked the door, and told the neighbors I'd run away. For years, I thought the silence was my punishment until I found out it was their plan. They used my name, my story, to build a fortune, while pretending I never existed. And 20 years later, when their lawyer bowed to me, I realized revenge doesn't always scream. Sometimes, it smiles. I woke up to cold floors and colder silence. The kind of silence that hums in your ears like static when something's just not right. It was Saturday, no school, no chores, but the house was already empty. No clanging pans, no smell of burnt toast, no dad grumbling about the news. Just nothing. The living room TV was still on, showing nothing but snow. That gray, flickering fuzz filled the room like a ghost had been there and forgot to leave. The fridge held little more than an expired milk carton and 2 slices of dry bread. Something felt off. Not just bad day off, more like the walls had shifted overnight. On the kitchen table sat a single folded note. No envelope. Just sitting there like it had been placed with intention. I stared at it for a long time before touching it. My gut already knew. I unfolded it anyway. "You'll do better on your own. We can't help you anymore." 12 words. Typed. Signed in my mother's handwriting. I read it again. Then again. Each time it got colder. No explanation. No sorry. No hint of regret. Just a key to the house taped to the bottom corner and a phone number listed as foster services. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't spur of the moment. They planned it. I clutched the note with both hands, then loosened my grip when it started to tear. I looked around the room, suddenly seeing everything different. The missing photo frames from the mantel. The empty coat rack. They didn't forget me, they erased me. It's funny, the first thing that came to mind wasn't why. It was, did they even talk about it over dinner? Did they say my name? I sat down hard, the chair scraping the floor. Was I really that useless to them? My voice didn't even echo back. Like the house was trying to keep the lie going. They were always more involved with my older siblings. I was the quiet one. The smart one. The one who didn't cause trouble. And somehow, that turned me invisible. I thought back to my 11th birthday, everyone was too busy for cake. My science fair win in 9th grade? Dad said, "Good for you," like I'd told him I cleaned the garage. Mom called my perfect attendance not something anyone brags about. I called my mom's number. Disconnected. Then Dad's. Same. I walked to the next door neighbors, the Thompsons. When Mrs. Thompson answered the door, she looked surprised. "Honey, your folks haven't been around all week," she said, scratching her head. "Didn't they tell you?" I thanked her, pretended to know what was going on. Then walked back. Gray skies overhead, heavy clouds rolling in. My shoes hit the pavement harder with every step. Some birds need to be kicked out of the nest, my mom once told me. I used to think she was joking. The screen door squealed when I opened it. That sound used to annoy me. Now it was the only thing that acknowledged I was there. I didn't cry. Not right away. I sat on the porch until my hands went numb. That's when Mrs. Bramley, the old widow next door, shuffled over. She didn't say much. Just sat beside me, handed me a warm slice of banana bread, and said, "Sometimes family means the people who stay." I looked at her, eyes stinging, but still dry. That sentence hit deeper than anything else all day. She handed me a white envelope. "This came to your mailbox earlier. Didn't want it blowing away." I hesitated. I don't know why. Maybe I thought it'd be something different. Something better. It wasn't. Inside was a document, typed, signed, notarized. A formal relinquishment of parental rights. It had everything, legal jargon, government stamps. But one line stood out: Kitty Ann Hargrove is no longer a legal dependent of William and Marlene Hargrove. The date on the bottom? 2 months ago. So they'd known. For months. They weren't overwhelmed. They weren't desperate. They were done. And they made it official. I stared at the signatures. My mother's name, in her neat cursive. My father's, messy and slanted. They signed away their rights like I was a cable subscription they forgot to cancel earlier. That's when the tears came. Hot and fast. But not just from sadness. Something else stirred. Something low and sharp. Anger. They thought I'd disappear. Fade into the system. Be someone else's problem. I folded the paper slowly, precisely. Walked to the living room, lit the candle on the windowsill, and stared at my reflection in the dark glass. I will not disappear. I didn't say goodbye to the house. I didn't need to. It had never felt like home, not really. I stood there on the porch with a backpack slung over one shoulder, everything I owned rattling inside. A few changes of clothes, a lined notebook with half the pages already filled, and my father's old wristwatch. It didn't even tick anymore, but it still held weight. Maybe not time, but memory. I locked the door behind me. It clicked like a final period on a sentence I didn't get to write. The road out of town wasn't much, just a long stretch of cracked asphalt cutting through fields and dust. I walked it anyway. The sun dipped low, turning everything orange and gold. Cicadas screamed in the trees like they were trying to warn me, or cheer me on. Hard to tell. You can't choose your beginnings, I said aloud, repeating a quote I'd once read on a diner napkin, but you can choose your direction. And so I walked. A few miles later, tired and sunburned, I stumbled across a small roadside diner that looked like it hadn't changed since the 70s. The neon sign buzzed weakly over the windows, and through the glass I saw a woman stacking plates behind the counter like she'd done it every day of her life. Mrs. Lowell didn't smile when I walked in. She sized me up like a mechanic eyeing a rusted car, already guessing the broken parts. "You hungry or just lost?" she asked. "Mostly both," I said. She nodded, motioned toward the sink. "You scrub, I feed you. That simple." And it was. I washed dishes for the next 4 hours until my fingers wrinkled. She didn't ask why I was there, and I didn't tell her. But something passed between us when she handed me a grilled cheese and sat down across from me. "I've seen that stare before," she said, chewing slowly. "It's what people look like after they've been pushed out too early." I didn't respond. Didn't have to. A guy named Eddie worked the grill. Early 20s. Cocky smirk. "You're too smart to be scrubbing plates," he said once, flipping a burger without looking. "What did you do, run away from some Ivy League cult?" I gave him a tired smile. "Something like that." One night, during cleanup, I spotted a faded help wanted ad pinned to the back wall. Same diner. Same job I was doing. But the kicker was at the bottom, my mother's handwriting. She'd written a recommendation for a girl I vaguely remembered from school. Someone else had gotten a chance. Not me. That wasn't just abandonment. That was replacement. They hadn't just left me. They'd offered up my role to someone else, like I was an extra seat at the table they no longer needed. The days melted into a routine: open the place, clean up, eat what I could afford, write in my notebook, crash in the back room. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. Mrs. Lowell started to notice. "You're not surviving," she said one night as we mopped the floor. "You're building. That's different." She encouraged me to take night classes at a nearby community center. So I did. Reading. Writing. Even a basic law class taught by a retired judge who never smiled but always showed up. One Tuesday night, during a break, a girl from my old neighborhood sat next to me in the hallway, flipping through her phone. "I saw your mom at the farmer's market in Dallas," she said, casually. "They told folks you went to live with relatives." My hands froze around my cup of coffee. "They moved?" I asked. "Oh yeah, like last year." Said it was a fresh start. Whole family looked good, too. I excused myself and walked straight to the library down the street. It took me a while to figure out the internet, but I found them. New address. New jobs. New family photo posted online: Mom, Dad, my brother and sister all smiling. The caption? "Our perfect family. So proud of how far we've come." I stared at that screen until my eyes blurred. They hadn't just left me. They deleted me. Erased the idea of me so cleanly that they could smile for a camera without a single crack in their lie. That night, I sat at the bus stop with my journal open across my knees. My hand trembled as I wrote. I wasn't useless. They were blind. And in that moment, I decided I would study law. I'd learn every angle of the system that allowed people like my parents to do what they did and walk away clean. I wasn't chasing revenge, I was chasing clarity. Protection. Something real. When I told Mrs. Lowell, she just nodded. "You're not broken, kid. You're just getting started." I held that thought as I looked up at the night sky. No stars, just clouds. But I didn't care. "They'll see me again," I whispered, "and when they do, they'll remember what they threw away." Later that night, I boarded the bus. My backpack rested against my feet, the broken watch ticking in my hand like it still had something left to say. I showed up at the legal aid seminar that evening hoping to catch a spark of direction. The room was half full, aging desks, fluorescent lights, and a clipboard at the front for sign-in. I scanned faces and froze when I saw him, Greg Langston. He sat near the back, head bent over a packet of papers. A man in a suit I recognized from a faded family photo. My father's former business associate. Greg's eyes flicked up, just a moment, and he froze, as though seeing a face from memory he didn't expect. I swallowed hard. Slowly, I slipped from my seat and followed him as the group broke into discussion groups. In the hallway, I caught up. "Greg Langston," I said, voice steady but cold. "Why did they leave me?" He turned abruptly. "You weren't supposed to see that letter," he said, voice trembling. He glanced away, then back. He looked uncertain, afraid. I pressed, "Which letter?" He shook his head. "Better not. It'll only hurt more." He stepped back and, before I could demand more, slipped out the door and disappeared down the corridor. That night, I sat at my computer in my tiny apartment, hands shaking. I used contacts I was starting to build in public records, judges' clerks, courthouse clerks. Weeks passed. I followed mail records, property deeds, official transfers. And then I got it, a notarized statement from my parents consigning legal guardianship to a family friend while they claimed they'd be traveling long-term. The paper spelled out something I never dared imagine: unsuitable for family reintegration. My name removed quietly from their legal obligations. A provision that disowned me by statute. They didn't just abandon me emotionally, they legally severed me. My breath caught. Father's scrawl on the margins, mother's signature in crisp ink, they erased me on paper. I stepped outside into the night, heart pounding, and walked back to the neighborhood I grew up in under cover of darkness. The street was quiet. Houses stood lit, trimmed lawns. I found my old home, replaced windows, new siding, a welcome mat by the door where ours had cracked and faded years ago. A neighbor emerged. "Katie?" she said, uncertain. She offered a hesitant hug. "Your folks talked," she murmured. "Said you went off the rails. They said they had no choice." I nodded. That phrase, recycled for strangers, was new to my ears. My reputation resurrected as someone unstable. I looked at the yard I once mowed, now kept immaculate, and felt something ancient snap. Back in my apartment, I closed the blinds and sat at my desk. I remembered dinners where 3 chairs sat at the table, but most nights the third was left empty. Guests, interns, business associates took my place. My chair was never reserved. I pressed fingers to my temple. I was never the third chair. I was the placeholder. Words I hardly recognized, but they felt true. I thought of Mrs. Lowell's line, "People don't abandon the permanent. They abandon the placeholders." I opened a binder I'd begun assembling: guardianship form, social media family photos, public post captions, board documents. I typed into forums anonymously, traced legal appeals, reviewed wills, collected affidavits. A reply popped up: "If guardianship was relinquished, any will excluding you may be contested." I circled it, printed it, taped it to the inside of my mirror. I stared at its reflection late into the night. They erased me from the story, but I was writing the ending. I woke to sore muscles, my bones heavy from too many late nights and too few hours of rest. My shoulders ached where I'd leaned over my notebook, combing through statutes and filings. Glancing across my small apartment, I saw the binder on my desk, its edges worn, pages bulging with evidence, red markings, legal briefs. Greg's face and that disowning document hovered in my mind. I massaged my temple. Today, I told myself, I would push harder. I whispered into the quiet, "You define your value, not them." And with that silent vow, I stepped into the day. The diner was already warming up when I arrived, plates clinking, coffee brewing, the low hum of early patrons. I slipped behind the counter, grabbed an apron, and got to work. The steam and heat familiar, the routine grounding. But my mind raced even while I rinsed pans. Tonight's class in constitutional law awaited. I'd read cases on guardianship and parental rights between orders. I thought about how those statutes might serve me someday, not as theory, but as weapon. In class, I stayed alert. When a student asked about volunteer experience, I deflected. Tension flickered in eyes across the room. I kept my face calm. One evening, the professor presented a mock case, a teenager deserted, parents placing legal guardianship on someone else. I volunteered the closing argument, that abandonment is a silent theft of identity. I stayed late, connected precedents to what I discovered, and drafted my speech. When I stood in front of classmates, quiet filled the room as I spoke. No theatrics. Just truth. At the end, soft applause. Afterward, the visiting attorney, my professor for the night, drew me aside. He praised the clarity of my argument. He offered, "I can introduce you to legal clinics and pro bono networks." My heart froze. Exposure could mean danger. I hesitated, then accepted on condition of anonymity. He warned me, "When you fight shadows, they try to catch your light." I nodded, knowing he spoke the truth. Later, I found an envelope slipped under my dorm door. Inside, a newspaper clipping. Headline: Local Teen Wins Debate Contest. The credit line: Anonymous participant. The photo? Cropped, but unmistakably me. My heart pounded. They were watching. I tucked the clipping in my binder, pressing its weight against the edge. Recognition had begun, but I was still half in the dark. Standing before my mirror later, I touched my father's broken watch on my wrist. The face was cracked, the hands long unstuck, but I wore it anyway. I whispered, "I'm not just fighting for me anymore." There was fire under my quiet. I could feel it. Ashes don't bury seeds. They feed new growth. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday, slid under my apartment door like an invitation from a ghost. Heavy paper, gold seal, embossed letters, the Walker Foundation Annual Gala. I read it twice before setting it down. My parents' names gleamed on the header like polished lies. For a moment, I thought it might have been sent by mistake. But then again, nothing about them ever was. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with the invitation in front of me. My reflection caught in the window glass, older now, sharper around the eyes. I'd built a small consulting startup, barely keeping the lights on, but it was mine. And now they were out there using our name as if nothing had happened. I decided to go. Not to be seen, but to see. The night of the gala, the hotel shimmered under spotlights. I borrowed a dress from a friend, plain enough to blend in, and stepped into a world of silk and champagne. Every face there carried confidence money could buy. The air hummed with that familiar arrogance I'd grown up around. Then, from across the ballroom, I saw them. My parents. Dressed in the same perfection they'd always worn. My mother's laughter rang out like a rehearsed melody. My father shook hands, his charm effortless. A guest beside me whispered, "The Walkers? Oh, they're incredible. Their daughter's doing amazing things, I hear. Such a talented young woman." The irony almost made me choke on my drink. The music faded. A host took the microphone, and the lights dimmed for a video presentation. "Tonight," he said, "we celebrate the Walkers and their daughter's remarkable dedication to community service." My stomach dropped. Then came the slideshow, photos of my parents, smiling, arm in arm with a girl who wasn't me. Or maybe it was. My face had been digitally blended into those images, me volunteering, attending events, hugging them as if we were some shining family. The crowd clapped. The applause felt like a slap. They had rewritten me again, this time for an audience that would never know the truth. My skin buzzed with anger. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. My life, my struggle, turned into their redemption arc. I waited until the applause died down, then slipped toward the backstage hallway. They stood under bright vanity lights, accepting congratulations from strangers. My voice came out steady. "You really don't get tired of rewriting history, do you?" My mother froze mid-sentence. My father's face drained of color. "Kitty," she whispered, glancing around. "This isn't the place." "Oh, I think it is," I said. "You built this place on lies. You built it with my name." Her tone turned measured, rehearsed. "We didn't mean to hurt you. We had to protect our reputation." "You don't protect someone by erasing them," I replied. A volunteer nearby stopped stacking chairs, eavesdropping. My father's jaw clenched, but he said nothing. The silence between us said everything. I walked out before I said something I couldn't take back. Down a side corridor, I found a storage room door slightly open. Inside, boxes marked archive. Curiosity pushed me forward. Inside the boxes were family photos, newsletters, framed memories. My childhood reduced to glossy paper. But something was wrong. Whole pages from my old scrapbooks were missing, replaced with new images. And in one folder, a note written in my mother's hand: "Too many eyes on her. Too much risk." I sat on the floor, heart pounding. One photo had survived the edits, a small picture of me at 6, reading under a yellow lamp, hair falling into my face. I tore it out and folded it into my purse. "That was me," I whispered. "Not the version you made." When I stepped back into the ballroom, people were starting to leave. The laughter, the sparkle, it all felt hollow now. Near the exit, a woman stopped me. Her badge read Dallas Chronicle. "Kitty Walker?" she asked softly. "I'm Marla. I know what they did tonight. If you're ready to talk, I'll print the truth. But be careful, people like that don't lose quietly." Her words stayed with me even after she disappeared into the crowd. As I moved toward the door, I caught sight of Aunt Winona across the lobby. She smiled faintly, nervous eyes darting around, then turned and left without a word. Another silent spectator. Outside, the air was cold and sharp. The city lights flickered off the glass towers, reflecting a world built on appearances. Behind me, the gala continued, full of laughter and lies. In my hand, the photo felt heavier than it should have, proof of what once was, and what still mattered. "They built a mask with my name," I murmured, watching the limousine lights fade down the street. "Tomorrow, I'll break it." The office was nearly silent except for the ticking of the wall clock and the low hum of my old computer. The air smelled of burnt coffee and printer ink. It was well past midnight, and I was still at my desk, papers spread out like a battlefield. Every document told a story, my story, and I wasn't going to let them rewrite it again. The desk lamp flickered, casting long shadows across the floor. I'd been combing through statutes, cross-checking case law, reviewing every line of the complaint I'd drafted. It accused the Walker Foundation, my parents' empire, of misrepresentation, false claims, and the use of fabricated personal narratives. It was my truth, finally documented in legal form. My phone buzzed. Jackson's name lit up the screen. "You're really doing this?" he asked. "I'm already in it," I said. "They'll fight back hard. You know that." "I'm counting on it." He sighed, then hung up. I stared at the final page of the complaint, feeling a mix of fear and resolve twist in my stomach. For years I'd been quiet, strategic. Tonight, I wasn't hiding anymore. I attached the file to a secure email, routed it through an encrypted server, and hit send. Copies would auto-forward to the press and legal networks if anything happened to me. As the progress bar filled, I whispered to myself, "This is it." By sunrise, the story had broken. Local foundation accused of false claims. The headline splashed across every local outlet. My heart thudded as I read the opening line: "An anonymous complaint filed against the Walker Foundation alleges falsified public records and fabricated charitable narratives." My name wasn't listed directly, but it didn't take long before someone made the connection. Photos followed, side-by-side comparisons of the fake gala portraits and the real snapshots from my childhood that I'd submitted as evidence. The contrast was undeniable. By noon, my phone was buzzing nonstop. Marla, the journalist who had my trust, sent a message: "It's spreading fast. Stay off social media." But I couldn't. I watched the debate unfold online. Comment after comment, strangers dissecting my life. Sounds like a bitter daughter out for revenge. No, look at the documents, it's real. Why would her parents fake that? Money, reputation, same old story. Then came the statement from the foundation. "We are deeply saddened by the malicious attempt to defame our charitable work. These allegations are false and deeply harmful." Signed by my parents. Their PR machine was already working overtime. By evening, the backlash began. An email came from a partner organization, politely reassessing their collaboration with my startup. Another message from a sponsor: "Due to recent developments, we're pausing our support." My stomach sank, but the anger burned hotter than the fear. A co-worker at the legal clinic, Sam, looked at me with concern. You're poking at powerful people, Kitty. Just be careful. They can ruin you. I smiled faintly. They already tried. A few days later, an email from an unknown address circulated among local firms: "This girl is unstable. Do not associate." The same words my parents had once used to justify giving me away. I printed the email and pinned it above my desk as a reminder. Laureline, my attorney, sat across from me in her modest office the next morning. "They're trying to discredit you," she said, flipping through a binder. "We'll counter with evidence, not emotion." I nodded. Together, we prepared affidavits, statements from old teachers, a former neighbor, even Mrs. Bramley, the woman who had taken me in after my parents left. Every testimony chipped away at their illusion. Marla ran the follow-up article 2 days later. The Walker Foundation faces questions over false narratives. This time, it wasn't just gossip. It was data, documents, patterns of misuse. The story quoted me directly for the first time: "Truth doesn't need approval to exist." I began receiving calls for interviews. I chose my words carefully, staying calm and measured. "All I'm asking for," I told one reporter, "is honesty. If they built their success on a lie, they owe the public the truth." Meanwhile, the foundation scrambled. Rumors leaked that several board members were demanding answers. One resigned publicly, saying, "I cannot in good conscience continue." It was small, but it was enough. Days later, a statement appeared on the foundation's website: "We regret any confusion caused by previous communications regarding our daughter's involvement. There was no intent to mislead." They called it a miscommunication. I called it the first crack. I sat in my apartment that night, the binder open in front of me. The city outside was quiet except for the hum of passing cars. I touched the corner of one page, the guardianship form that had started all of this, and exhaled. "They heard the knock," I said softly to myself. "Now it's time to kick open the door." I got there early. Too early. The legal clinic headquarters was still half dark when I unlocked the front door. My heels echoed on the tile floor. I moved through the quiet halls, gripping the binder like it might fly out of my hands if I didn't hold it tight. Inside the main conference room, I spread out my notes. Opening statement. Witness list. Rebuttal points. Press inquiries. I'd gone over this 100 times. But this morning it felt different. In that silence, I thought about Mrs. Bramley. Her porch light was the first one that stayed on for me when the rest of the world turned dark. She didn't ask questions. Just opened the door and gave me a bed. That memory kept me steady now. A knock at the door pulled me out of it. "Your parents just arrived," the receptionist whispered, eyes wide. I felt it then, the pounding in my chest. This was it. Later that evening, the community hall filled. A legal aid forum hosted by the city, public, recorded, and packed with familiar faces. Attorneys, donors, volunteers, board members, reporters with their recorders out and eyes sharp. And there they were. Mavis in pearls. Hoyt in tailored regret. My parents sat right up front. I took the podium slowly, clearing my throat just once. I didn't say my name. Didn't need to. "I grew up in someone else's picture," I began. "My name appeared in programs, my smile in photos, but the rest of me? Vanished from memory." The audience stilled. Mavis looked straight ahead, her face like carved stone. Hoyt crossed his arms. "There are stories that people sell, about sacrifice, about generosity. But when you're the child in the photo, and you never agreed to be there, that's not charity. That's theft." The room murmured. I saw cell phones lifted. Record buttons blinking. I held my breath and finished, "Truth doesn't need a name, it just needs to be told." I stepped down, heart hammering. But then Mavis stood. Polished. Controlled. "We've always believed in giving back," she said sweetly. "It breaks our hearts to hear this confusion. We supported our daughter's journey from afar, always respectfully." Delton, one of their longtime attorneys, followed with a statement in legalese. "She is entitled to her story. But that story is not ours." They were trying to frame me as bitter, damaged, unreliable. A board member cut in sharply, "Let's keep this civil." I stood again. This time, no script. Civility isn't the same as silence. Then, a voice I hadn't expected: "She walked out with a suitcase in the rain. None of you all saw it. But I did." The crowd turned. "Do Winona." She stood, hands shaking. "I told Mavis, don't do this. Don't push her away. I begged. And I kept the letters, the ones you told me to burn. I kept them because I knew one day, Kitty would need to know someone tried. She held out a worn envelope. My breath caught. I hadn't seen that handwriting since I was 16. I looked at Mavis. Her eyes were wide, lips tight. You said those were old drafts, I said softly. She didn't respond. And in that moment, the weight started to shift. I turned back to the crowd, raised my voice without yelling. You erased me. But I found a pen. Gasps. Applause from the back rows. I'm filing to reclaim my legal identity. And I'll pursue full audit of the Walker Foundation's public claims. Hoyt's jaw twitched. Mavis flushed red. Cameras flashed like firecrackers. I didn't flinch. I stepped down, head held high. Each step off that stage felt like peeling off another layer of shame they'd wrapped around me. Outside, the air was cool. My phone buzzed. Marla, your speech is everywhere. I looked out at the lights of the city. Then down at my own reflection in the glass. They heard me, I whispered. Now they must listen. I stepped into the Foundation's boardroom with Lurleen at my side, heart calm but eyes sharp. The room was packed, Hoyt at the head, Mavis to his right, Delton at a corner. Trustees watched from their seats, papers and coffee cups before them. I opened my dossier, the weight of every page anchoring me. Without hesitation, I began placing document after document on the table, financial statements, altered marketing materials, side-by-side images of reality versus fiction. I looked at them all. Remove my name from all your public materials, I said. The murmurs rose. Mavis blinked, her composure faltering. The board exchanged uneasy glances. The depth of proof lay exposed. They had to listen now. I turned the lights down and projected a new file. It was the scholarship I had quietly established years ago, under my name, my funds, my vision. But in their records, it was listed as a Walker family gift. I pressed play on the recording I'd captured, Mavis's voice, clear and merciless, candidly saying they would rebrand under the family name because my visibility was risky. Silence filled the room. Board members stared at one another. Some whispered apologies, glancing at their phones. Others looked away, cold. The false narrative they built was unraveling before them. Lurleen then called Winona to the stand. Aunt Winona, corners of her eyes creased, hands shaking slightly. She held a stack of letters, Mavis's handwriting on every envelope. She confessed what she had kept silent all these years. She begged Mavis not to abandon me. She withheld those letters from destruction. She kept what others told her to burn. She revealed how she once pleaded, "Don't send her away," but was silenced. Her voice cracked, but the truth landed heavier than any performance. Mavis's face twitched. Delton looked down. I felt vindication flood me. Someone from their side had broken their silence. Just then, Lurleen's phone buzzed. She looked at me. "He's in the hospital, your father. Kidney failure." My blood froze. I left the boardroom in silence, walked through corridors, and found Mavis already there, tears staining her makeup, worry plain on her face. She pleaded, "Kitty, please, help him, for family's sake." I looked at her. Years of betrayal lined her face. I said, "If I do this, for you, then on conditions." She nodded, defeated. Within a few hours, signatures were inked. Guardianship was revoked. A public apology was drafted. Medical funds were transferred legally. The foundation's name was stripped from my projects. True to form, the next morning the media erupted, trustees resigned, public statements reissued, press outlets labeled it the fall of the mask. Their empire, built on my erasure, was cracking in full view. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't celebrate. I watched. That night I walked into my apartment and pinned the real scholarship certificate, my name, unaltered, to the wall above my desk. I gave you nothing. You took everything. Tonight, you earn it. Closure isn't an endpoint. It's a slow unraveling of pain until only memory remains, and then, you decide what to do with it. I sit here now in my apartment, morning light across the walls, opening my journal and writing, "What does it mean when the war is over, but your scars still speak?" I filled these pages with losses, strategies, hopes. The old apartment held echoes I couldn't live with. This place, walls I touched, pictures I chose, feels quieter, kinder. I hung a small photo of Miss Elva on the living room shelf. After work, I found a letter in my mailbox, elegant cursive, soft edges. Miss Elva wrote she saw me in the trials the city broadcasted and always knew you were a force. I drove across town that evening to her modest porch, where she greeted me with warm tea and stories of the girl I was, her words gentle, real. She smiled and said, "When the tree is strong, no storm can uproot it, but it's the roots they never see that make the difference." Months later, in a banquet hall full of soft lights and steady applause, I stand behind a podium that bears my name. This gala is for my nonprofit now, its influence surpassing what the Walker name ever commanded. Mavis and Hoyt are absent, their foundation quietly dissolved, no public farewell. From the stage I speak of cycles of pain, honesty, healing. I tell the audience, it's not about proving them wrong. It's about proving yourself right. The room rises. They don't clap for my past, they recognize what I became. The next morning, before dawn, I drive out to a quiet stretch of beach. I hold an old fold of paper, a poem I scribbled years ago, "I will not break where they bend me." I read it aloud, letting salt wind ride my words. Waves erase footprints in sand, but not the weight of what's inside. Flashbacks drift, charity photos, boardrooms, that moment when Ona testified, and dissolve into sunrise. I decide, then and there, to mentor 3 teenage girls from my nonprofit, not saving them, but walking with them, planting seeds, giving roots that cannot be pulled. Days later, an emailer arrives, "Hoyt is failing, asking to see me." I argue inside me for days, but I go. In a sterile hospital room, he lies pale, voice gone. I sit, take his hand. I whisper, "I wanted to hate you forever. But I won't carry that weight anymore." He doesn't respond. I leave without looking back, carrying something lighter, choice. Not long after, I publish an essay in a national journal, "The Cost of Silence." I don't name names. I write of what happens when people stop listening, and what it takes to reclaim your voice. Invitations follow. On stage at universities and women's groups, a woman in the crowd stands, voice trembling, "Thank you. Now I know what strength looks like." I close my eyes for a moment. Not pride, recognition. I am no longer the girl they discarded. I am the woman I chose. That night, back home, I find an envelope sealed on my desk. No return address. In the corner, simply, "Mother." I hold it in my hand, breath steady. I look at the certificate on the wall, the genuine scholarship in my name. I set the envelope down without opening it, flick off the lamp, and feel that old weight loosen. Maybe someday I open it, maybe not. The past can knock, but it doesn't decide whether I answer.